Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Now, let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. So, can we all agree that we've had to face that awkward conversation with our parents on sex ed? I will not forget the day that I learned about it and had the talk with my parents. As parents, it's a big role to undertake in preparing our children for the world and helping them grow in a world with a good understanding of situations relating to others. It can be hard to know what a child should know and at what ages it is appropriate. So to help us guide us into understanding it a bit more is clinical psychologist joining us from Indonesia, Kantiana Taslim. How are you going, Kantiana?
Hi, Dina. Nice to finally meet you. By the way, you can just call me Nana if it's easier.
Okay, perfect, Nana. That's amazing. So as a clinical psychologist, your focus is in a lot of areas regarding children, adolescents, and families as well. Can you tell us a bit more about what your position sort of entails?
So, right now, currently, I've been practicing as a clinical child psychologist at my joint practice with my colleagues, like called Ohana Space. And basically, usually I'm handling like children, adolescent, or like maybe sometimes I also help young adult and family to help them get through their whatever they want me to help. Like usually from the sometimes development things from development issue from children like younger children or like from the adolescent or like the school age children. It's usually more like the emotional issue or like the family issue. The things that usually that parents also ask me to help is like more from the parenting side point of view, things like that. That's my usual daily routine job.
Okay. And I know that psychology is not something that you just sort of wake up in the morning and decide you want to do. So, what about psychology, and especially when it comes to children and families, what got you into going through the career of psychologist?
Maybe at first it was more like the wake up call for me. It was more like a personal experience because I used to have also a lot of anxieties back then when I was around elementary school and junior high school. But then I met one of my child psychologists back then that helped me get through my problems like for so many years. And then I think that was such a wake up call for me that, oh, I think it was not just me. And then, like, maybe a lot of children also need that kind of help from the professional that apparently back then, this psychological was not something that you talk about more openly. It's not like right now. I think that's the more like a wake up call for me.
Well, it's an amazing thing to be able to use your own personal experiences and put it into a career. It's not something that you just wake up one morning and decide to do. So it's nice when you can use your own experiences and sort of pass it on and help someone else.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe like I hope that I still can help the children and like so many people like moving forward too, you know.
Well, I hope to see that. So to get to know you a little bit more, we like to have a little icebreaker.
Oh no,
And so
okay.
so it's just to share a few of your personal, a few of the things that you like according to these keywords. So just say the first things that sort of come to your head.
Okay.
So the first one is your favorite book.
Harry Potter.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. It is so much better to read the books than to watch the movies.
Yeah.
How about your favorite movie?
I don't know Midnight in Paris.
Oh, I
Have
love
you
that
watched
movie.
it?
Yes, I've seen it so many times and I can never get
Yeah.
tired of watching it. Now, how about your favorite podcast?
I don't know. I don't think I have one, but maybe I just start to watch you guys
Oh,
right now
okay.
because it was more like random. Like it depends on my mood, what kind of things that I want to hear at that moment. Sometimes I listen about the comedy podcast. Sometimes I listen at more like the horror one or like the guided meditation kind of things. It is depends.
It's amazing how many podcasts there are for pretty much
Mm,
every genre as well.
yeah.
Because I honestly love watching, listening to the true crime podcasts.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I listen to that on my free time. So I'm kind of a
Mm.
psycho, but like, I really
Yeah,
love listening to them.
a good one. It's okay.
Yes. At least I can admit it. Okay. So starting with why you came onto the show today, we're talking about sex education and in terms of parenting as well. It's such a big thing to be able to talk about, and I think we are talking about this off camera as well. We are talking about how much it's not spoken about, and how interesting it actually is.
I think like about sex education itself, it's not something that you just suddenly talk about with your children. You know that you really need to from the beginning when they're still like in early childhood. You still have to like maintain a good creating and maintain a good communication with them, like really get into that kind of uh, the authoritative parenting style where you like as a parent you know that you have the ground rules, but at the same time you also allow your children to have to allow your children to have that open communication with you, like to throw up some of their ideas and make it into the reality. That kind of parenting that should be the groundwork for the things that you want to talk about in the next future, including the sex education itself. I think that's like a lot of work to do. It's not just like pop up like overnight.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So to start off, what do you think? What do you think is your definition of parenting?
I think a lot of people have their own definition of it, but um, regardless, that parenting itself, it's kind of a process and a journey where you not necessarily like only nurturing the child or like rearing the child, but also like giving them education, like putting the values, like the values that you want them to have in their life, like helping them to transitioning like through their life journey, like from the child into the adolescent, and then from the adolescent into the adult. That's kind of like the never ending journey and never ending process when you get to the parenting itself. I think that's kind of like the definition of parenting for me is also like promoting child's growth, not only like physical growth but also like emotional growth. Yeah, I think that's kind of things that overall integration of like what kind of parenting that. Yeah.
It's honestly such a big, like, it's a loaded question. It has such a big variety of definitions, and so many people have sort of seen it in every guest. We ask that question to every guest, and it's always something completely different. And it's so interesting as to how broad of a question it actually is. It's not such a clear cut black and white statement that parenting is this, because parenting is
Hmm.
not black and white. It definitely is not black and white.
Yeah, it's
So,
gray with a lot of colors.
yes, exactly. So, what do you think the expectant parent needs to be aware of in the transition to parenthood?
Sometimes I don't know, like sometimes some people, like maybe some societies, see the pregnancy as achievement or maybe a milestone to be accomplished. But you know that it's not, like it's a different journey for every individual, for every parents to be. As a parent, as an expectant parents, you can learn from many reliable resources that you can find, like for example from books, like from classes that you can find it like a lot these days, like parenting classes. That you can also like having a discussion with your doctors or like with any other parents that also already experience it firsthand. But you know, sometimes you also, with a lot of information and like the resources that you can get, also like the discussions that you are able to have firsthand, you also have to set your realistic expectation, because like you know sometimes like with a lot of information we, oh, so parenting is like I should, as a parent I should do this, but sometimes we forget that every journey for every individual is different. Like even like you and your partner also could have a different journey as a parent, right? So we should like as a parent we should like set the realistic expectation for ourselves, also for the children itself, like your for your future children, because like you know that every children also like born with like unique individual characteristic that you cannot treat them all the same. You have to pay attention to what kind of things that they need, what kind of trait that they have as a children, sort of this kind of things. So yeah, it's more like set the expectation realistic.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think so. Like it's such an interesting journey, and it's not at all anything
Mm.
that you are able to sort of control, especially in your journey to understanding it. And every parent sort of goes through a completely different journey, exactly like you said. And it's so, I mean, just like parenting, there's no clear cut way of going through it. Now, going into the question and into why we're here today, what is your definition of children's sexual education?
First, you know, like when we talk about sexual education, I don't know, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when we talk about sexual education? Just like a pre question before I answer this.
My it's so different. Like my definition of
Hmm.
I've never been asked the question, so this is very interesting. Um, my definition of children's sexual education, I think, is just understanding how your own body works and understanding the different
Mm,
parts of your body. And um, I really like being completely nerdy about things and completely trying to understand pretty much every little part. So I think that's like I get that such an interest in learning a lot about how the body works and how important it is, because it's something so simple that is so it does so much. So
yeah,
that's I think
I
it's
agree.
I don't know how to describe it. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because like maybe comes from from your culture. It's kind of like, I don't know, that you also get to experience the sex education firsthand, like from the early age. But in some cultures, especially maybe in like some Asian cultures, such a taboo things to discuss about. But as I said to you earlier when we had our conversation back then, that currently, thankfully, that some schools, like some communities, starts to open up about this topic more, so the children could get the education, the sexual education that they need according to their age. So maybe sometimes, like when people hear about sexual education, some people like cringe or like you or some children's like you said, giggling when we talk about sexual education. It also happens to me when
Yes.
I was being a speaker in like some schools. When I was being a speaker, like talking about the sexual education, some children like, "Yeah, Miss, what is this? What's that we're gonna talk about today?" Things like that because they're not used to it, right? So for me, as you said, that the definition of sexual education itself, it's not only about talking about the sexual relationship between like man and woman and man, woman and woman, man and man, but it's more about like get to know your body. It's like you're aware of your body, like you appreciate it, and then you have a good perspective about it, like you know your body parts, and then it's also about like you feel comfortable in your own body. That's like the things that we also want to put value into the sexual education, right? And also, like, with a lot of crime and a lot of sexual crimes going on, like harassment, abuse, things like that. We also want to teach the children about the boundaries, setting the limitation, what the people can do, what people cannot do, what they feel comfortable with, what they feel uncomfortable with, and then how to set their own boundaries. And also, like, it's not about only setting the boundaries for them, but also like setting boundaries for others, like how they can maintain a respectful relationship, especially with their friends, with their partners, things like that. And it's not about the one thing conversation, one thing like teaching. It's like the things that along the way, regardless of the age of the children, that it has to be done over and over and over again, because it can be different from for like every level of age, or like every level of education for the children is different, right? I think that's my kind of definition for sexual education.
It's so interesting just how much it helps to sort of understand your body and understand how it works and how it functions. It's sort of I sort of put it in the same way as nutrition. Like, you understand what goes into your body.
Hmm.
And that's like the very similar thing to how I sort of see it when it comes to like a sexual understanding and understanding yourself. And it's just that other part of yourself that you need to know about.
Yeah, it's interesting the comparison, but sure, I agree with it.
It's a weird comparison to me because, like, when you say, like, for me, there's so many things that come into when I talk about sexual
Mhm.
education. It's like your sexual understanding, all of that things. So when it comes to parenting and it comes to talking to your children about this, what is the relation between sexual education and parenting?
I think, as we also talked about it earlier, like the it's not like popping up like overnight, right? You have to put all the foundation into it, like the communication is like the trusted relationship, because like without the trusted relationship between parents and the children, this kind of education or conversation will not happen, right? The parents will like,
Yes.
should I talk about it, or the children like too shy to ask about it. So the groundwork is really like the trusted relationship between the parents and the children, and the good communication. So it means that the parents could create a safe and a safe space for the children to be able to feel comfortable and like to talk about it and like being honest with themselves and with the parents as the people that they trust the most in this kind of conversation. I think that's kind of the relation, the most important relation between the sexual education and the parenting itself.
It's very interesting because, like, when you're talking about it, you sort of try to relate it to how you expect parents to be able to talk to your children about it. And it's not always an easy thing because it's not something
Mm,
that, one, your child really wants to hear from you, two, that you really want to have to explain to your child. And
mm,
it's like the awkwardness is just probably pretty much a step that takes place no matter what situation you sort of dive yourself into. And there's always going to be that awkward conversation, and it kind of feels like a rite of passage to be able to like have that talk with your kid or hear that talk from your parent.
yeah, actually, it's kind of like you know that sometimes it's also difficult because maybe we as a parent, also like they as a parent, don't have that kind of never experienced that kind of conversation to begin with, or never have that kind of education, and also maybe the style of communication itself in the every family is different, right? But then when I also like was talking about the sexual education with the in the parent session in some communities or schools, I also talk to the parents about why it is important for them to also like put a habit into themselves to really talk about it to the children or like to whatever like their partners or like every other people that they can like like put a good put the use of the habit to like really using the words like penis or like vagina, like really use that kind of
Yeah.
words for the body parts, the true words. Because if parents themselves are not comfortable with using that word, it's kind of like confusing for them to teach their children. And it usually will end up like the children really don't know about the what's the correct word for it because parents keep using like not the real word to explain things to the children. So I think like the
Yes.
habit for the parents to really talk about it with themselves, with their partners, or like with the other people that they have to put the use of I mean like they have to really get used to it before they feel comfortable to talk about it with the children. I think that's the important part also in this kind of like talk, sexual talk with your children. What else? I think for now,
It's
that's the thing that I can think about.
it's such like it's so weird to sometimes have like you're having that conversation with your parent, and then like I've seen so many of my friends who are sort of like we've had a huge discussion as to how
Mm,
you were sort of spoken to, like, or had the talk with them. And I've got it from a cultural sense and also from like very like a Western point of view, and it's so interesting like the amount of times that instead of saying the word like vagina or anything like that,
mm,
they say the private part. And it's just like that,
yeah.
if you can't like you said, if you can't say the word as a parent, then it's not going to work.
Mm. Yeah, because like as I said, it's also related with the communication things that we talked about earlier, right? When we creating as a parent, when we create a safe space to talk about anything with the children, not only about sexual education, it's like little by little, like any topics that your children want to talk about with you, it's gonna like feel the same to them, whether they want to talk about their friends or whether they want to talk about school or their relationship or even this kind of sexual talk. So when parents start to talk about private matters to the children, including the sensitive topics like sexual education, it will not feel like such a that heavy burden, because like they already get used to it, like little by little they putting the good communication skills and good communication and trusted communication with the children from like very early. So yeah, it will also, like you said, it will also help with the awkwardness because it's
Yeah.
not something that they suddenly like, oh, I should talk about it right now. Like
Yeah,
that.
you're not gonna have that conversation sitting and eating dinner together. Like that's not the right time to have those kind of conversations for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah, but
So,
sometimes when it's just like another point of view, but sometimes when we are really in a comfortable environment with the children, like eating dinner or like having game nights, and then like when we eat dinner, when we have a game night, and we start to bring some topics that we want to talk about with them. Sometimes when it's like kind of the chill and relaxing environment, it kind of work, like the children could open more a bit instead of like, okay, what time that you have, because like I need to talk about this, how about after dinner, how about after school. Sometimes it makes them like, okay, what do I what do I do wrong? Like why my parents want to talk to me, what my
yes.
parents want to talk to me about, like things like that.
No,
So
exactly. No,
some
I totally relate to that. So, speaking of the best timing, when is the best time for parents to begin that sexual education with their children?
you know that it's never too early to talk about sexual education with your children, but you also have to consider the age appropriate level when you talk about topics like that. For example,
Hmm.
like to help them understand the body parts, you can start from the earlier age, like 1 year old or like 2 year old, when like uh, you help them get changed, you help them like get to shower, things like that. So it could be like starting from there, and then like maybe more like older children, like starting to ask questions about when that sometimes like parents and children still like go into the shower together, like help the children to go to shower or like get changed and everything else. Like sometimes the children also ask questions to the parents, right? So like for example, like when it's a boy and then the mom helps him, like, oh, why is it different, why I have this and you don't have this kind of things gitu, like that. And then you can start to explain things to your children. Oh, so the things that you have, it's called penis, and the things that I have is called vagina. So it's different because you're a man and I'm a woman, things like that. So it
Hmm.
can be start early, but it also depend on like what kind of questions that your children ask, or what uh, kind of age appropriate level that the
Yeah.
conversation should take place, things like that.
Hmm.
So for like children or older children, like teenagers, it's kind of like maybe the different conversation. It's like more talking about the puberty and then like the first relationship that they have, things like that. So it's different.
Hmm. So basically, when they're younger, when they're really young ages, you talk about anatomy of the body
Hmm.
and those kind of understandings to
Yeah.
help them a little bit more into like why, like exactly what you said, why women and men are different, why you and me are different, and things like that. So, but as they get older, like having more about relations and more about sexual relations is something that is a bit more encouraged to talk about then.
Mm.
Hmm.
Then and also
Okay.
about like the the consent, that we can teach about the sexual consent or about the relation, the boundaries early on with the younger
Hmm.
children, like when you feel like, oh, because like when we already taught them about the body parts, like the breast, the vagina, and like maybe what's you call it, the bottom part, like ass. Am I rude? I
No,
hope
no,
not.
no.
Like when you already teach the names about all the private parts to your children, then you can start to teach them about consent. Like, oh, so from this part, like the breast part and your private parts like the ass and the vagina or the penis. It's something that people cannot touch. The people who can touch is yourself when you clean
Hmm.
yourself up, or the parents, for example, your mom or your dad when they help you clean up or get to shower or get changed, things like that. So uh,
Hmm.
teach consent to the children, and then when you feel like you feel uncomfortable when people like touching it or like hugging you or like ask you for a kiss and things like that, what should they do? Like going to the people or like the person that they trust, for example, if it's at the school, going to the teacher and like asking help, or going to the crowded place to ask help to the public, to the person there, or like when they're at home, call the parents, things like that. So it's also about the consent, the
Hmm.
sexual consent or the consent boundaries, things like that, that you can also teach the children from the early age.
So, for example, like if a child starts preschool and
Mm.
they're going around with all these other kids, so if a child felt uncomfortable, for example, with a situation, if like with another child their age, like kissing them without consent, that's something that you would teach them to say, okay, it's okay to feel uncomfortable and just talk to someone in charge, talk to the teacher, tell them you don't want that to happen. So it's that kind of situation where you sort of guide a little bit more into consent and boundaries.
Yeah, that kind of consent and boundaries. And also like when the situation is like when you're playing with your friends, obviously when something happened, and then besides talking to the grown up, you can also like being assertive and talk to your friend about it, like, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable when you're doing this or this. So it's also teach them how to communicate effectively and assertively, right?
Hmm.
That kind of things also like the things that we can teach them. And beside like growing to grown ups, they can also like have a talk with their friends if it's also the people that they know, like for example the friends. And when the situation is like when they play together, they can also like communicate it with their friends. And also like
Hmm.
it's not only about teaching them how to set boundaries with themselves, but also like teaching them to how to treat others like in a right way, right? Like when you want to hug someone, of course you have to ask permission with to your friends or to the people that you want to hug, for example, or to the people you want to kiss, for example. You have to ask permission for it. So it's also teach them how to treat others with respect, regardless of.
Hmm. It's really interesting. Um, so why is sexual education important for children to learn?
I think it's like more like a sum up from the topics, like all the things that we already talk about. So like to give themselves, to teach themselves being aware of their body parts, to make themselves know how to treat their body with respect, to clean themselves up, things like that, and also how to set boundaries and give consent with other people when they want to do something with you, or like when you want to do something with other people, like giving consent, treat them with respect, asking permission, things like that. And also about like the safety from your for your children, right? It's like, okay, so when like we already talked about it, like when something bad happened to you or you feel uncomfortable, you feel scared about it, like where you can go, where you can ask for help, things like that. So it's also, so that's why it's important to put that kind of value from the very early age to the children. So along the way, when they grow up, they also like get used to it, and they know how to ask for help when they need it. And also like along the way, when they grow up, it's not only the safety, uh, the boundaries from the real world, but also like from the online world, right? When they also using gadgets, when they already have the conversation online with their friends or with strangers sometimes from the online social media platform, things like that, it's also gonna,
Hmm.
it stays with them. We can also like remind them over and over again, or like put some new values into it, add some new values into it, but it stays. So the work for the parents not gonna be that much hard. It's like compared to like when you have the talk or when you teach them about it when they already like get older.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are the most common obstacles that parents face when it comes to teaching their children of sexual education?
First, maybe like the communication itself is like the first thing that hard to do, right? It's like when you
Hmm.
really have to start the conversation. I think that's the challenge for most parents. Like, how can I start the conversation with the children? How can I like really ask them about it? Things like that. That's the first challenges that usually the parents faces, uh, the parents deal with, and then secondly, it's also about the you know what what they say it. How can you say it? Like about the information. Is like which information that I am able to tell the children, which information that I know the resource is reliable, or like
Hmm.
when I don't know about some information that the child asks, what should I do? Usually the parents also feels confused when the children come to them and then ask about something that oh they really don't know the answer. So I say to the parents usually that it's okay if you don't know the answer. Don't say that and like make something up. It's also gonna teach your children that you can lie and make something up when you don't really know about something, right? So just be honest about it, because like we're as a role model, we have to like put it into action. When the parents don't know about it, just say that you don't know, and then you can. I don't know. But I'm gonna come back later with the answer. I'm gonna like looking for the answer first. Maybe I'll ask to someone else, or maybe I'm just gonna read some books, or maybe like we can look for the answers together, like from the books or from the reliable video that you can watch together with the children, things like that. I think that's the challenge that usually the parents faces deal with.
It's really funny listening to some parents like all the questions that kids ask and how
Mm.
some parents have to deal with it. Children ask the funniest questions sometimes, and there are no actual answers that you can have for a lot of them, and you can never be too prepared for how many questions a child will ask anyone. And it's not just a
Yeah.
parent, just anyone.
And
So
usually it also shocks us like, okay, how can they ask that?
yeah, I it's not even a question I've thought of, and it's
Mm.
something they're asking parents these questions, and I'm like, how do you get there? Because I'm not even there asking that yet.
It's amazing how they can get critical along the way.
Yes, exactly, and they want a full answer as well. They expect a
Mm.
full answer.
Yeah.
So what are some of the best practices, in your opinion, that parents can use to educate their children about sexuality? And how can they implement these practices?
Actually, I really don't. I don't have like. I mean, like, well, best practice is kind of subjective, right? That nothing that we can say that oh, this is the best or this one is the best. But along the way, just like first like I said, do the groundwork first, like creating a safe space for your children to go to you and have an open communication and good relationship with you, and then you can use any other tools that you feel like you're comfortable with using. For example, for children younger, you can use like the charts, like the body charts, or like you can also use the children's book that explains about the body parts, or you can use the dolls to explain it to your children, just use whatever tools that you feel like it can help you to talk about it with your children, to make you at ease, to make the children at ease. Also, like along the way, incorporate some plays into it. I think it's also good. Yeah, I think that you can use the tools that you feel like you're comfortable with, and children can feel comfortable too when using it. And secondly, it's also about like fine about, you know, like as a parent, we also have to observe our children, right? Like paying attention to them, like what kind of things that they like, what kind of things that they don't like, who their friends are, like what kind of activities they do at school, things like that. So put that observation into knowing what kind of things that sparks up your child's curiosity at this moment regarding of the situation or regarding of this topic, the sex education things. So and start from there. It's like like you can like in some like relaxing session, like when you have a heart to heart conversation, you can ask your children like, okay, so these days what kind of things that sparks up your curiosity, what kind of things that you feel like you want to know, things like that. So just start conversation from there. And also like you can also use your your own feelings and thoughts into the process of having the conversation. For example, like like so yesterday I went with my friends, and then like like telling us stories about it, like and my friends having a baby. Do you know where the baby comes from? Like just try to get to know what kind of things that the children already know from that topics. So yeah,
Okay.
from we can start from there, like from what they already know, from the tools that you and the children feel comfortable using it, and also the relaxing environment to start it with. I think that's the third important things that I could give.
Well, that's really good practices. And I think like especially it's amazing how much children already know when you ask
Mm,
them. Like, especially when you ask them where do babies come from. Majority of kids at certain ages already know the answer to it. They already know what the process is. They already know where like usually their answer is, "Oh, baby comes from mommy's tummy," and that's what they know.
mm,
And so it's really interesting to like you said, go off of what they already know and just sort of build up from there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Data from there. And also maybe like, we talked about it also earlier when we watch some movies, and then comes the scene where the children not
Yes.
supposed to see, but they see. Usually we just like ignore it, right? Some parents like, okay, just ignore it or like cover the children's eyes, things like that. But when the children like old enough to have that kind of conversation, we can also like after watching it, we can ask them like, okay, so you see some scenes that maybe not appropriate for your age, but well, you have seen it already, right? So we can start from there, like what do you think about it, or what do you know about it? Maybe at first they were like, what is this? But it's important for us to like get a grasp of what kind of things that they already know, right, from the things they saw. Just like making sure that they get the right information, especially that when the information comes from us. If we don't ask, like we are just ignoring it, um, it's gonna be hard when they don't know about it, but they look for another information, the resource like not from us, or like not from the reliable resources, right? So it's better to
Mhm.
just have the hard conversation at first, but we're making sure that they know what it is and they get the trusted information.
I think we were talking about this a little earlier when it comes to the availability of
Mm,
movies and shows that you can watch that
yeah.
have explicit scenes in it, that have scenes showing between uh, sexual relations and things like that. So the sex scenes that come into the shows and movies, and it's so interesting how like especially with streaming services now, like there's no if unless you add a block to it, there is no block.
Mm,
So children are able to see pretty much anything that's on show, anything that's on the streaming service. So it's the amount of resources that's there just to be able to help in terms of like the what's happening, what's going on, and having those conversations. I think it's really interesting how common it is to show up in pretty much any situation now.
Yeah. That's why I'm not saying that we should spy on the children as a parent,
No.
but I think it's better if you know what kind of movies or like series that comes into the online entertainment platform, so which kind of shows that your children watch these days. And it's also better if you really like watching that show, just to get to know like what kind of shows that your children watch, and
Yeah.
is it something that they're not supposed to watch on that shows? So if there is, you can talk about it with them. It's like, I think there's some sin that, blah blah blah, and then like, what should we do about it, things like that. If it's really a good movie or like a good shows to watch, but need parental guidance, so yeah, you can like incorporate it into your daily routine with the child, so they can watch as long as they have parental guidance when they watch about that show, things like that.
Yeah. The amount of times that I've started a show or started a movie and did not realize how explicit its content
Mm,
really is really interesting because they hide it in there so
mm,
well nowadays,
mm.
and you
Yeah,
don't know.
until you watch it, until you really see
Exactly.
it. Yeah, I know. That's why like so many things to do for parents these days. But well,
Yes. It's pretty much everywhere now that you like nowadays, and it's pretty much in everything that you watch. So it's good luck parents in this day and age, honestly.
yeah. Oh, such just an additional things. Maybe if you feel like with your daily schedules and things like that, that you don't really, you cannot really like observe or like like watching your children over about this kind of things. Maybe it's also important to use the what's like the kids mode or like the lock, like
Yeah.
you lock, things like that. So it's also, yeah, it's important because like when we cannot like watching over them like 24 hours, right? So we can use, we should use all the things that we can use.
Yes, parental lock is was a big thing for me growing up as well. It was pretty much on a lot of shows. I think there's a
Hmm.
TV, the old TV that we had a parental lock on it, so certain channels you weren't able to watch without the code. So I think we only had the kids channel and the news channel. So it was very interesting watching things with my parents, like certain Australian shows that came on.
Yeah.
So going on into practice and habit, which is another aspect of the show that we love to share. What is a practice that you teach your children about sex education?
um since I have no children yet,
Yeah.
but usually when I talk about sex education with my clients, that I use the tools that I can get to make them feel comfortable and not making them feel as if like they're being talked into something that they don't really want to talk about. So it's more like a chart, and like it's not a doll, but it's more like like a chart where you can like um, put the body parts on it, and then you can take
Okay.
it off again, things like that. You can also like teach that body parts and teach about the gender things, tools like that. It is for the younger children, but for the older children, I usually just talk with them. It's like, okay, so I'm more like a straightforward, so it depends also with the children, but if the children is old enough and they can talk freely, I'm just like talking with them. Okay, so right now you're in the on the age where you should you will hit puberty like in like a few months or things like that. So what do you know about puberty in girls? What do you know about puberty in boys? And usually when the parents there, and I also invite them to join the session, but I will ask the children first whether they're comfortable enough to have the conversation with the parents, or they just want to have the conversation in private with me first. And then after that, we can see if the parents can join the session, things like that. So if the parents can join the session, so it's good. But if the parents cannot because the children feel uncomfortable with parents join the session, I'm just have the talk with the children. I just have the talk with them, and then after that, I have the session with the parents to tell the parents about things they should know, like the important things they should know about it, that they should be not concerned, but they should also do with the children, like the practice or the conversation that they can start to have with the children. I think it's more like what I usually do with the sex education in like younger children and like more like older children.
And how do you think that this practice and this conversation has impacted their sort of perception into life as a child that's growing up?
It's interesting because sometimes oftentimes it differs from for every child, right? There's the child that never have this at all, have this kind of talk with the parents. There are children who like actually know about it, but never have guidance from the parents. So, they just know what they know. So when I talk about it with them and like we discuss about some information, for example, like about the teenagers, for example, about the contraception, about condom, stuff like that, they know, but they don't really know. So when they get that kind of information from me, we have discussion about it. They're like, oh, so that's it. So so it's something like that kind of thing. So it's interesting. And for children who don't really know about it, they usually like at first they feel shy to talk about it, but then okay, they just like digest and hear about that kind of information. But then when they want to ask about the question, sometimes they ask the things that they want to ask, but they never know uh, where or like to whom they should ask the questions to, things like that. So yeah, it's always interesting to work with children.
Is there ever a situation where, like, especially when it comes to adolescents, is it
Hmm.
important that, for example, a female learns like, sort of tries to have an understanding of the male reproductive
Hmm.
system? Or is it like, do you just learn the female one and the male learns the male one?
I think it's important for them to know both in order to, um, treat one another with respect. They also have to know about it, right? So, usually when it's in the community or at school, when we have about the sex education with a lot of children, we never like at first we never like separate them into two section, like, oh, this is just for boys or this is just for girls. No, at first we always like put them in the same place, and then we explain to them about what happened with girls when they hit puberty, and also what happened to boys when they hit puberty, about like consent, stuff like that. It's all in the same place, so they will know what they have to know about the others, and they also free to ask questions about it. But then for more like, maybe like, sometimes like you want to ask questions that maybe some girls or some boys feel uncomfortable to ask about in the public with like the other sex or the other gender, like be around you. And after that we have another station that we separate them into the two rooms, and then like one room for boys and one room for girls. There they can ask questions like the things that they didn't ask before in the previous session, but they can ask more questions there. But at first we always like put them in the same place so they will know about one another, so they will know, and then they will we will teach them about respect, boundaries, things like that. And after that,
Okay.
so
Okay. It's really interesting how that system is, because it's something that does happen pretty much, I think, in most countries where they do have that, where they do talk about it and they do talk about the different, because it's really interesting how there are some places in the world that don't talk about the other gender. They talk about your gender, but they don't talk about the opposite sex. And
mm,
you can tell how you can tell the kind of people that aren't really speaking about that. And
mm,
especially as they get older, like I've got a lot of friends who didn't really know about it until they had us as friends, or they had like they were in an environment where they got to talk about it. So you learn a lot from friends as well, and from other people around you. So not just like your parents or teachers or anything. How do you have those conversations with your child if they already know a lot of stuff from their friends? Have there been situations where that's happened?
yeah. Mm, Usually that's where we could start, right? From the things that they've already known. So okay, what things that you already known from your friends, or like from other platform that you've already seen. From there we can like, oh okay, so A B C D, this and this. So we can like, from the things that they've already known, okay, which one that you think is like a misconception and which one is like the fact. We can talk about it and having a discussion with it about it with them. It's like, okay, if it's a misconception or if it's the fact, so which resources that is reliable enough for us to know that it's a fact, or if this is a misconception. So things like that. Just start from what they already know, and then like guide them into like what kind of things that is right and factual, what kind of information that is some kind of a misguided information, things
Mhm.
like that.
So going on to the next topic is going to be questions from audience, and we've got quite a lot of
Mm.
questions,
Oh,
quite a lot of
okay.
questions sent over to us. So the first one is, what kind of sexual behavior is considered normal as a child?
Mm, Here's the thing. So if it's kind of hard, but here's the thing: if uh, what they really want to know, usually like for children, for younger children, they usually want to know about, oh, what name of the body part is this, what function this body part can do, things like that. It could consider normal, because like, oh, that's the kind of level that they're in. They get curious. They want to know what's happened in their body, right? And then sometimes for children like around maybe like a toddler until like under 5, they sometimes they like play their body parts a lot. It's like when they play their body parts a lot, it's not because like, you know it's not because they want to get sensation of it or things like that, but it's because they're curious about their body parts. So it's the time for you to explain, oh, what is this, and what its name, what it used for, and then what you should do and not should do about it. Like for example, you can clean it up, you can like put soap, you can like when you get to shower you can clean it, things like that. But oh, what kind of things that you shouldn't do with it, because like it's so important, it's such a sacred things. Your body is such a sacred place for you, the things, sacred things that you have. So what kind of things that you shouldn't do with it, because it can cause your body parts harm, and then it can make you feel sick or get sick, things like that. So just explain it to them. And also about the older children or maybe about teenagers, if watching pornography about things like that. It sometimes it still could consider normal because they get to the level where they want to know about it, right? Where they already have the information about it and they want to know about it. But then what things that we should do to like prevent it from happening again, or like to get the facts straight when they already get exposed to it. It's the things that parents should know. Like, okay, have a conversation with them, what they already see, which one is, we already talked about it, which one is factual, which one is a myth. So why is it not healthy for them to keep watching it? That's the thing that's still considered normal. But if the action or the behavior keep continuing over and over again and it becomes like an addiction, it's the things that I think that you should worry about, and like you should get some help, because like,
Okay.
yeah, if it's already happening, keep happening over and over again, there's something that you should know, right? That you should uh, you should help them to treat it with,
Okay.
get the help or the treatment that they need.
Okay. So the next question is, how can we limit children's exposure to explicit media, given that we parents can't always be around them, especially when it comes to a school environment?
You know, maybe like the tools that we can use, such as kids mode, parental guidance, or like parental lock, we can optimize that kind of things. But at school, I don't know about it, but sometimes like when schools provided Wi-Fi connections or like the internet services, usually they also like, you know, put some lock into what kind of website that, or like some kind, what kind of platform that the children could use, or what kind of website that the children cannot open. I think it's important to have the partnership, like a good partnership and a good communication with the schools, to really like set boundaries and have a talk about it. So it will prevent miscommunication and like issues in the near future from the parents and the school itself.
So, what ages do you recommend that children should be introduced to sexual education at school?
I think it's like from the early age, it's already could be introduced, right? So like when they're about the preschool or like kindergarten, the sex education could use like tools like the songs, like books, or like storytelling, or like, you know, the charts, dolls and things like that. They could pick their interests, and also could teach them about the body parts, consent, things like that. But yeah, I think you can do it like from the early beginning of the early childhood. But then also like it depends what kind of tools that you have to use regarding of their age, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really big to talk about it at school, especially when it comes to the influence of friends and what the kids wouldn't find out from friends. So at school, I think in Australia, I remember there was this Healthy Harold that sort of came around. It was like this toy giraffe that had someone's hand up it, like a puppet giraffe, and they were just talking about the body and anatomy, and then they had that kind of talk. So they did it through like a puppet and talking to us about our bodies. That was a really cool introduction to understanding how our bodies work. But I think, especially going to a very specialist school, it was very interesting to see that it wasn't widely spoken about at school. It wasn't something that you sit down and have a conversation about. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
each school is very different.
yeah, it's different, and I also think sometimes it also depends on the value that the school has, right? Because they have their own value and their own ways to put the value into practice and to teach the children about it.
Yes, exactly. So the next question is how to educate autistic children about sex.
Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting, but I think it's more like if it's severe, it will be far more difficult for the severe autistic children to have this kind of information, right? But for the mild autistic children, or like with the Asperger syndrome that could still function while in daily life, it's like we could teach them the basic things, the basic things like from like okay, so the body parts, of course with their own ways, right? Like each children, like even the autistic children has their own different ways, right? So just depends on their own ways, but we can teach them the basic things like their body parts, and then especially the consent, like where people shouldn't touch them and what should you do if it happens. But we should provide them with more like a simple ways. If it happens, like how can they ask for help? It's like more a simple way for it. So it's also important for them to have like the people that they can trust, or like the people that they can as a guardian around them, just to
Mhm.
just to make sure that they are okay and they are safe. But we also have to teach them the basic skills like body parts, awareness of their own body, and more like the consent things. It's like the basic things that eventually we all have to teach them.
Yeah, that was a really interesting question when I saw it because it's like it's a very specialty kind of case, and I think each autistic child sort of goes through it very differently and understands things very differently. So yeah, it's a really interesting question. So the last question, and this has been asked multiple times, so I'm going to put it into one question.
Mhm.
For security or safety reasons, as young as what age should we make children aware of their private parts and have them understand that no one is allowed to see or touch them?
Yeah, from as early as they can understand the instruction. I think when they already be able to communicate, like for example, not
Mhm.
communicate like they fluent in like talking or things like that, but as long as they already understand about the instructions, that's where we should start to teach them about it. It's like two,
Okay.
3 years old, as early as that.
Okay. And that's pretty much before they go into
Mhm.
preschool and kindergarten and things like that.
Yes, yes. So along the way,
Okay.
when they hit the kindergarten or like preschools, like of course we have to remind them again and like as I said, add more value to it. But as long as they already get to know, like understand the instruction, how it works, we should be able to teach them the basic things.
Okay. All right. That's perfect. Now, we're going on to the last little segment of our show called the open mic. It gives you a chance to talk about anything that you want to share with the audience. It can be something that you are passionate about. It doesn't have to be related to this topic today at all. It can be anything that you are wanting to share with this whole audience that you have here. So, yeah, I'd love to give the floor to you for the last few minutes of the show.
Okay, actually, I don't think I will talk much in this segment because I also not prepare for it. I don't know what I want to talk about, but actually, like, as a clinical psychologist, I think it's important for us to spread spread the awareness about the mental health, about the education, the psychological education, about things like that more into the society, because sometimes the stigma, it's still really it's still getting real. It's not about only in the some parts of the country, but I think it's like more around the world. It's still the stigma is still there, so it's important for us to talk about it more, to have this kind of like open session more, so people, it's important for them to like get all the information that they could get, like what kind of information that they want to get, and they can get the access easily. But it's also important for us, if we also like, have some kind of issues. Sometimes it could be overwhelming for us to listen about this kind of information, right, over and over again. So it's also like wise for us to like be able to select what kind of information that you need, what kind of information that you should see or listen. Because if not, the overwhelming information that you get could make your condition worse. Because like, yeah, we should be able to like what select which one that you really need, and which one just put some, it when like some information is really useful and some information is not, that you don't really need it, things like that. So I think it's important to have this kind of platform, but at the same time also like being wise to select what information that being useful to you. I think that's it.
Well, that is an amazing way to end the show, and an amazing topic to talk about to sort of end everything. I want to thank you so much, Nana, for joining me on the show today. And
It's 1 hour is like flying by so fast. It's also like
I know.
it's a pleasure for me.
Well, yeah, thank you for joining. Like, you're joining me straight from Indonesia, and I'm so glad that you were able to come on and talk about this topic. It's really interesting. Like I said earlier, it's near and dear to my heart because it's something that I love looking into and I love talking about. So yeah, thank you so much again for talking to me. If there is a way that an audience member would like to get in touch with you, is there a way that they are able to?
So before, I also want to thank you that you guys have been inviting me to share some information and have a discussion through this podcast. It's such a pleasure, and like as I said, 1 hour is like flying by so fast. And if maybe some people like need to get help, like I'm based in Indonesia, so you can go to Ohana Space, like I already mentioned, that is where my current practice with my colleague. So it's we're not just providing session for children, but also like from children until like adults and like senior years. So that various practices that you can find in Ohana Space. And you can go into our Instagram, and then if you need it, you can like contact our admin. There's a link there. So yeah, just do that,
Okay.
or like go to our website ohanaspace.id. I think that's just it.
Okay. I will have that link down below and have that available for any audience members who want a little bit more into what Ohana Space is. And I love that it's called Ohana Space as well, because it means family, and
Yeah.
I got it straight away. Don't worry.
Okay.
So thank you everyone for listening today, and I hope that you guys have found this as beneficial as I have. And if you want to follow us on social media or anything like that, all the links are down below. We've got our website there as well. And yeah, I hope to hear from you guys soon. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys in the next episode. You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant, and thanks for tuning in.